what's the latest on Steven Avery? His lawyer reveals all. When it comes to the case of Steven Avery, it's one that shows both the highs, lows, flaws, and inconsistencies of the legal system. Even if you don't believe he's fully innocent of all the crimes lobbied against him, you have to admit that he was indeed wrongly convicted of some of them based on the fact that others were eventually found truly guilty. And for years now, he and his lawyer team have been trying to prove his innocence in all matters. To them, they say they're making progress. But are they? We'll break it down for you. The life of Steven Avery. Steven Avery was born in 1962 in Manitowoc County, Wisconsin, to Alan and Dolores Avery. Since 1965, his family has operated a salvage yard in rural Gibson, Wisconsin, on the 40-acre property where they lived outside town. Avery has 3 siblings, Chuck, Earl, and Barb. He attended public schools in nearby Mishicot and Manitowoc, where his mother said he went to an elementary school for slower kids. According to one of his lawyers, in 1985, school records showed that his intelligence quotient was 70 and that he barely functioned in school. Not something you want to hear about yourself, if we can be honest here. On July 24, 1982, Avery married Lori Matheson, who was a single mother. They have 4 children together, Rachel, Jenny, and twins, Stephen and Will. As his life went on, it was clear that there were some things wrong with him. And some would argue that this meant his future problems were all but assured. But if you look deeper, you might actually question that. Law troubles begin. It's fair to say that Avery was not the greatest person on earth, as he did have trouble with the law from time to time, specifically in the 80s. His first offense was going and robbing a store with a friend, and that got him 10 months in jail. Then he apparently killed his cat alongside some friends, and that led to him going back to jail for animal cruelty. 1985 proved to be one of the worst years of his life, as apparently his cousin was spreading very unflattering rumors about him, and he ran her off the road and pointed an unloaded gun at her to get her to stop doing that. He was sentenced to 6 years for that crime. But also in 1985, he was accused of something that he would later be proven innocent for. After 18 years, the false arrest. In July of 1985, a woman named Penny Bernston was assaulted and violated while on a jog one day. During a photo lineup, she said it was Avery who was the attacker. You'd think that this would be a pretty definitive statement, as she was the one assaulted and thus would know the face of her attacker. But, as you likely already know, this was only the beginning of a very complicated matter. We say that because Avery was 40 miles away in Green Bay shortly after the attack. An alibi supported by a time-stamped store receipt and 16 eyewitnesses. Usually, that would be enough to prove anyone's innocence, and yet, he was arrested and charged with the crime, getting 32 years in jail for it. What's worse is that 2 different appeal attempts were denied in subsequent years. In 1995, a detective made a call to the jail that Avery was at and noted that an inmate had admitted committing an assault years ago in Manitowoc County and that someone else was in jail for it. The sheriff at the jail didn't believe him, and thus Avery remained in jail, which says a lot when you think about what happened next. Finally, in 2002, the Innocent Project used DNA evidence to prove that Avery was innocent and that a man named Gregory Allen had done the deed. What's important to note here is that Allen and Avery honestly did look alike. So at the very least, this was a case of mistaken identity gone horribly wrong. But while that should have been the happiest point in Avery's recent life, it didn't last. Teresa Halbach. Teresa Halbach was a photographer born in 1980. 25 years later, in early November, she went missing, and her parents called in to the police to let them know that their daughter was missing. Now, lest you think that her parents were just overreacting, they hadn't seen their daughter in days, and she honestly lived right next door to them. So if anyone would notice that she was gone, it would be her parents. Halbach was known to have visited the Avery salvage yard in Manitowoc County on October 31, 2005, days before her death. On November 10, 2005, following the discovery of her Toyota RAV4 vehicle partially concealed on the Avery property, Calumet County Sheriff Jerry Pagel conducted a search and found the charred remains of Halbach. Her cell phone, license plates, and car key were also recovered. A few days later, Steven Avery's blood was found in her vehicle, a clear sign that he was involved in part or in whole with what happened to her, or at least that's what many stated. Avery was charged with the kidnapping and the murder of Halbach, mutilation of a corpse, and illegal possession of a firearm. Controversy. Almost from the get-go, there were issues with this case. not the least of which was that some of the county sheriffs and law enforcement who were involved in proving Avery guilty of the previous crime were allowed to investigate the new case despite there being a civil suit by Avery against them. And some of the key evidence was indeed found by them. But as Avery's lawyers noted multiple times, not only was there a conflict of interest, there was evidence that was clearly tampered with, including a vial of Avery's blood from his wrongful conviction that had been unsealed, and a puncture wound was in the top of it, as if to draw blood from the vial. Avery himself noted that this was a frame-up because of his suing the county for what they did to him. Another controversy that came about was that of his nephew, Brendan Ray Dacey, who confessed to helping Avery with the attack on Teresa. But later, he recanted as he said he was coerced by the cops as they didn't let him have a lawyer present. Avery was found guilty of first-degree murder and illegal possession of a firearm and was sentenced to life in prison, as well as not getting the possibility of parole. His story would have ended there until Making a Murderer. In January 2016, after Making a Murderer had been released on Netflix, People magazine reported that one of Avery trial's jurors was the father of a Manitowoc County Sheriff's deputy, and another juror's wife was a clerk with Manitowoc County. That's a clear violation of jury code, and yet it was allowed. Juror Richard Mailer, who was excused from the trial after the jury had begun deliberations because of a family emergency, later commented that early on, 7 of the jurors had voted not guilty. He was mystified that the jury eventually agreed on a guilty verdict. Mailer's account has been disputed by other jury members who claim that no early vote had taken place, and that an informal vote was taken with only 3 jury members voting Avery not guilty. Another juror allegedly told the Making a Murderer filmmakers of feeling intimidated into returning a guilty verdict, fearing for personal safety, though these two have been disputed by those tied to the opposition in the case. Either way you look at it, though, it brought a lot of light onto Avery's case, and despite getting some legal victories over the years, he's still very much in jail. The lawyer update. Kathleen Zellner, the lawyer representing Steven Avery and leading his bid for freedom, has shared an update regarding his case. Taking to Twitter on Thursday to update her followers on any new developments, Kathleen said Steven's legal team were making substantial progress. More specifically, she said, "We are working every day on Steven Avery's case, and we are making substantial progress. We will never give up in our quest to rectify this miscarriage of justice. #TruthWins @Making a Murderer." That is her claim, at least. And based on what was going on in 2021, they did make progress of a sort, including getting some new testimony and evidence that claims there was another person who did the crime. The problem, though, was that they didn't get to take it to court after being rejected for an appeal. Still, they seem to be working hard to try and get him free, and if nothing else, that is something. So, what do you think? What do you think of this look at Steven Avery and what his legal team is doing for him currently? Do you feel as though they are indeed close to a breakthrough right now? Are they inches away from proving his innocence? Or are they putting a brave face on because they know they have nothing at present? Let us know in the comments below, and we'll see you next time on the channel.